Okay, this last part on cell bio is a discussion of kind of how cells are put together in organisms, and it's like cell organization. So unicellular organisms are don't really need to say much about them because they're just one cell and they don't really pile on top of each other to make bigger structures. There are some rather large unicellular life forms. This is Valonia ventricosa, one of the largest unicellular organisms in the world, and you can actually hold that in your hand. That's about the diameter of a penny, or actually larger. And I've held these in my hand, but the inside's hollow. The actual living part of the algae is only the surface. So it's deceiving. That's not a solid cell, okay? These are also pretty big too. That's almost the size of a dime in diameter, and that's a single cell. But again, if that was a solid like structure, a big round structure, the inside would die because there's not enough diffusion happening through the membrane to keep the core alive. Instead, this is super thin. This is the cap of acetabularia. It's one of the largest unicellular algae in the world. This one's slightly larger. But this algae gets away with it because it's super thin. In fact, both of these algae get away with being large single-celled structures because actually they're super duper thin. So diffusion can actually keep the super, super thin cells satisfied. A big solid cell like a chicken egg is not possible because the core of the cell would take hours for things to diffuse from the outside to the inside, and the inside would be long since dead and non-functional. So these are human cheek cells as viewed under a light microscope. These are really small. That's, you know, under high power, they're less than a half a millimeter wide. So really, really small. Multicellular organisms are not just piles of cells. The cells are all arranged in specific ways to create organization. In the human body, your cells are organized into tissues. One of the most basic tissues in the human body is skin tissue. It's called, technically it's epithelial tissue. Skin is actually an organ. It's made of all the tissues. So when you grab your skin and you pinch it, you're actually pinching 4 different tissues, or 5 depending on who's counting. But in those is epithelium. Epithelial cells form sheets, and in so doing, they make a barrier. Plant cells, when you look at a stem, if you cut a stem open and look at the inside, the cells are not just in there randomly. There's a central core, and that central core is usually it's a ground tissue. It stores things. And then, there's a dermal tissue on the very outside. That's what's out here at number 7. And then, as you move in, you have, again, these are storage cells here. And then you have these dark layers here and here. That's for conducting sap. And 3 and 4 here. This is for conducting sap at 4 and water at 3. So there is organization to the anatomy of a stem, and there's organization to the anatomy of human body. And the most basic level of organization is that identical cells pile themselves on top of each other and make a tissue. Tissues then pile on top of each other and make an organ. Skin is an organ, a liver is an organ, a heart is an organ. Every organ is a pile of tissues organized in a certain way. The reason you have a heart, which looks different than a liver, is there's different ways to put tissues together to make those different organs. An organ system is a bunch of interconnected or interrelated organs. So like your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine, your esophagus, your mouth, and your anus are all connected together as a pipe for processing food. That's an organ system. They make up the digestive system. An organism is a bunch of organ systems that are all working together to make the organism alive. So here's the human brain, which is an organ. Here's the nervous system, which is an organ system. And here's Charles Darwin, which is an organism composed of all these functioning organ systems. That concludes our discussion of cellular organization.